This is the most feared combination in the 60-year cycle. In the villages of the East, there are whispers about this year. There are superstitions that go back centuries. In 1966, the last time this energy visited the Earth, birth rates in Japan plummeted by 25%. Why? Because parents were terrified of bringing a daughter into the world under this specific star. They believed that a child born under the Bing Wu, the fire horse, would be unmanageable. They believed she would be a curse to her husband, a destroyer of her father's house, and a wild, untamable force that would burn through the family's fortune like a forest fire. They called it a natural disaster in human form. Modern man laughs at this. He calls it folklore. He calls it primitive. He believes that the calendar is just a system of counting days, not a map of energy. He is wrong. The ancients were not superstitious. They were observational. They watched the patterns of history for 5,000 years, and they noticed a specific anomaly. They noticed that every 60 years, when the heaven stem of Bing, yang fire, sat on top of the earth branch of Wu, the horse, the world went mad. They noticed that the human ego expanded to the point of rupture. They noticed that the structures of society, the family, the state, the church, were incinerated by a sudden, inexplicable surge of rebellious energy. We are entering the year of the Bing Wu in 2026. This is a deep dive into the anatomy of a disaster. We are going to dissect the physics of this specific pillar. We are going to explain why it creates tyrants, revolutionaries, and visionaries. And we are going to explain why, if you are not careful, this specific frequency of energy will turn your own life into a crater. This is not a horoscope. This is a storm warning. To understand the disaster, you must understand the architecture of the pillar itself. The Chinese calendar is a system of stems and branches. The stem is the energy coming from the sky, the celestial intent. The branch is the energy of the earth, the terrestrial reality. Usually, these energies temper each other. Water sits on wood, nourishing. Fire sits on earth, producing. Metal sits on water, condensing. But Bing Wu is different. Bing is yang fire. It is the sun. It is the most powerful, radiant, and visible force in the universe. It is the source of all life, but also the source of drought and scorching. It is the archetype of the king. It demands to be seen. It casts no shadow because it is the light. Wu is the horse. In the zodiac, the horse is the cardinal direction of the south. It is the peak of the fire season, midsummer. It is the time of day when the sun is at its highest point, high noon. The horse is the only animal in the zodiac that sleeps standing up. It is restless. It is powerful. It is the engine of war. So, what happens when you put the sun, Bing, on top of the peak of fire, Wu? You get fire at the zenith. You get a double yang structure. There is no yin. There is no water to cool it. There is no earth to ground it. There is no metal to structure it. There is only fire feeding fire. In physics, this is called a flashover. In a room on fire, a flashover occurs when the heat rises to a point where every combustible object in the room ignites simultaneously. The furniture doesn't catch fire from a spark. The furniture catches fire because the air itself has become fire. This is the definition of the Bing Wu pillar. It is an atmospheric flashover. When this energy enters the human system, it bypasses the logic circuits. It goes straight to the amygdala. It goes straight to the ego. It creates a state of high noon in the soul. At high noon, there are no shadows. This sounds positive. No shadows sounds like clarity, but shadows are necessary. Shadows provide depth. Shadows provide nuance. Shadows allow for cooling. When there are no shadows, There is no place to hide. There is no subtlety. Everything is exposed. Everything is binary. Everything is extreme. You are either a saint or a devil. You are either a patriot or a traitor. You are either with us or against us. This is why the fire horse is a natural disaster. It destroys the gray areas where civilization actually lives. Civilization relies on polite fictions, on compromises, on looking the other way. The fire horse looks directly at everything and burns it with the truth. What does this look like in a person? Or more importantly, what does this look like in you when the year activates this energy within your chart? The fire horse archetype is the narcissist of destiny. We do not use the word narcissist in the clinical sense of a personality disorder. We use it in the energetic sense. The fire horse creates a gravitational field where the self becomes the center of the universe. Bing, the sun, believes everything revolves around it, and astronomically, it is correct. When a human being channels this energy, they become incredibly charismatic. They glow. They radiate warmth, optimism, and power. They attract followers. They attract lovers. They attract voters. But the sun has a fatal flaw. It cannot see anything but itself. The sun does not know what darkness is. It has never seen the night. Therefore, the fire horse lacks empathy for the weak. It lacks understanding of failure. It lacks patience for the slow. When you are in the presence of a fire horse personality, or when the global cycle turns to fire horse, you will see the rise of the main character syndrome on a mass scale. Everyone believes they are the star of the movie. Everyone believes their opinion is absolute truth. Everyone believes their pain is the only pain that matters. This creates a society of colliding stars. When two suns get too close, they do not merge. They destroy each other. This is the disaster. It is the inability of the collective to cooperate because every individual is consumed by the I am. In 1966, this manifested as the Red Guards, millions of teenagers, each believing they were the personal savior of the revolution, each believing they had the moral authority to judge their elders. It was a mass outbreak of the divine ego. They did not listen to reason because the sun does not listen to the candle. They burned the libraries because the past was a shadow, and they were the light. In 2026, this will manifest as the sovereign influencer. Millions of people with cameras broadcasting their truth, demanding to be worshipped, demanding to be heard. The cacophony will be deafening. It will be a disaster of noise, a disaster of vanity, and like a wildfire, it consumes oxygen. The fire horse personality sucks the air out of the room. If you have a fire horse boss, you know this. You cannot breathe around them. They take up all the space. In 2026, the culture itself will suck the air out of your lungs. You will feel suffocated by the sheer intensity of the collective ego. To prove that this is not a metaphor, we must look at the data. We must look at the specific human disasters that occurred the last time the gears clicked into this position. 1846, the disaster of boundaries. In 1846, the fire horse manifested in James K. Polk and the manifest destiny of America. Polk was a quiet man, but he was possessed by the Bing Wu energy. He looked at a map and decided that he and his nation deserved it all. He started a war with Mexico not out of defense, but out of pure solar expansion. I am the sun, and the sun shines everywhere. This led to the conquest of the West. It built the empire, but it also led to the Donner Party. The Donner Party is the perfect metaphor for the fire horse disaster. They were driven by optimism. They were driven by the desire for the golden land, California. But they ignored the reality of the season. They ignored the warnings of the locals. They believed their own hype, and they ended up eating each other in the snow. This is the dark side of being Wu. The ambition is so hot it consumes the flesh. 1906. The disaster of hubris. In 1906, the fire horse manifested in the city of San Francisco. It was the new city of its time, wealthy, arrogant, golden. It believed it had conquered the earth. The fire horse arrived as the earthquake and the fire. But notice the human element. The disaster was exacerbated by the response. The military dynamited buildings to create fire breaks, but the dynamite only spread the fire. The human intervention, the yang ego trying to control the situation, made it worse. The fire horse punishes the illusion of control. It leveled the playing field. It turned the rich man and the beggar into the same thing, refugees in the ash. 1966, the disaster of the child. This is the most potent warning for 2026. 1966 was the year of the child tyrant. Mao Zedong unleashed the youth. In the West, the baby boomers unleashed themselves. It was the summer of love, but it was also the summer of riots. The fire horse energy makes the child feel stronger than the father. It inverts the natural hierarchy. The natural disaster here was the breakdown of the lineage. When the child judges the father, the civilization dies, because the child has energy, fire, but no wisdom, water. A society run by the fire horse is a society run by a tantrum. In the technical study of Bazi, 4 Pillars of Destiny, there is a specific interaction called the self-penalty. This occurs when certain earth branches meet themselves. Dragon meets dragon, pig meets pig, rooster meets rooster, and horse meets horse. 2026 is a horse year. If you have a horse in your chart, born in 1966, 1978, 1990, 2002, 2014, you are entering a woo-woo self-penalty. But even if you don't, the year itself is a horse, and the month of June, the horse month, creates the penalty for the entire world. What is a self-penalty? It is exactly what it sounds like. It is an injury that you inflict upon yourself. It is not the enemy who defeats you. It is your own bad judgment. It is the unforced error. The firehorse self-penalty is driven by impatience and volatile emotion. The firehorse moves so fast, it trips over its own hooves. It gets angry so quickly that it burns bridges it still needs to cross. It bets the house on a sure thing because it refuses to look at the downside. In 2026, the natural disaster will largely be a collection of millions of individual self-penalties. The investor who leverages 100x on a crypto coin and gets liquidated. The politician who says the quiet part out loud and gets canceled. The spouse who has an affair because they are bored and destroys their family. The nation that launches a missile to show strength and triggers a world war. These are all acts of the woo-woo penalty. They are acts of self-sabotage driven by an excess of yang energy. The engine is too big for the chassis. When you floor the gas, the car doesn't go forward. It spins out and hits the wall. Now we must add the final ingredient, the variable that makes 2026 unique in history, Saturn in Aries. In 1966, Saturn was in Pisces, water. This dampened the fire slightly. It made the revolution emotional, drug-fueled, fluid. In 1846, Saturn was in Aquarius, air. This fanned the flames of ideology. In 2026, Saturn is in Aries. Aries is fire, but Saturn is the lead box. We have a double fire, being Wu, happening inside a lead box, Saturn. This turns the natural disaster into a pressure cooker. Usually, a fire horse disaster is explosive, outward. This one will be implosive, inward. The human form of this disaster will be the internalized burn, because the state, Saturn, has built a digital panopticon that prevents open rebellion, the walled garden. The fire cannot express itself in the streets as easily as it did in 1966. You cannot riot if your bank account is frozen. You cannot burn the library if the library is a server on the moon, so the fire turns on the host. This is the cardiac crunch we spoke of. The disaster happens in the nervous system. The disaster happens in the mental health statistics. The disaster happens in the quiet quitting of an entire civilization that simply burns out and stops functioning. The natural disaster of 2026 is the Great Exhaustion. It is the sound of 1 billion human batteries exploding simultaneously because they were plugged into a socket with too much voltage. Is it all doom? No. Fire is a purifier. A forest fire is a natural disaster to the trees, but it is a natural necessity to the forest. The pine cone needs the fire to open. The soil needs the ash to regenerate. The Bingwu pillar is a catalyst. It arrives when a system has become stagnant. It arrives when the dead wood has piled up too high. The dead wood of our time is the debt, the lies, the corrupt institutions, the false hierarchies. The fire horse burns it all. It is ruthless, it is indiscriminate, but it is honest. Bingwu is the great revealer. At high noon, you cannot hide the rot. The fire horse year will expose every secret. It will expose the corruption of the leaders. It will expose the insolvency of the banks. It will expose the weakness of your own character. This is painful, but it is the pain of surgery. The disaster is the removal of the tumor. If you are a human form of the fire horse, if you are a visionary, a creator, a leader, this is your year. But only if you can survive the heat, only if you can avoid the self-penalty. So how do you navigate this? How do you stand in the center of the flashover and not burn? You must adopt the strategy of the salamander. In alchemy, the salamander is the creature that lives in the fire but is not consumed by it. How? Because it is cold on the inside. 1. The internal ice. You must cultivate a core of absolute Saturnine coldness, discipline, routine, stoicism. When the world is hot, emotional, you must be cold, logical. When the market is manic, yang, you must be still, yin. You must use the cold shock protocols we discussed, ice baths, fasting, silence. You must balance the Bing Wu with Ren water, Yang water. Ren water is the ocean. The fire horse cannot boil the ocean. The ocean is deep wisdom. Read the classics, study history, anchor yourself in the deep time. 2. The shadow work. The fire horse casts no shadow. You must artificially create one. You must look at your own dark side. The self-penalty comes from the blind spot. Ask yourself, where am I arrogant? Where am I reckless? Where am I delusional? Find your own shadow before the fire horse finds it for you. If you admit your weakness, the fire horse cannot use it against you. 3. The lightning rod. Do not try to bottle the energy. You must ground it. Work, hard physical work. The fire horse creates kinetic energy. If you sit at a desk, that energy becomes anxiety. If you lift weights, if you build a house, if you dig a ditch, that energy becomes muscle. You must give the disaster a job to do. I am not having a breakdown. I am building an empire. Transmute the destructive force into a constructive force. 4. The no ego mandate. The disaster is the ego. Therefore, the survival strategy is egolessness. Become the gray man. Do not seek credit. Do not seek the spotlight. Let the false kings burn themselves out on the stage. You sit in the audience. You watch. You wait. The fire horse gallops fast. It is here for a year, and then it is gone. 2027 is the year of the fire sheep, Ding Wei. The sheep is the graveyard of wood. It is the aftermath. It is the ashes cooling. When the smoke clears in 2027, the landscape will look different. The weak structures will be gone. The paper wealth will be gone. The false idols will be gone. What remains? The stone, the gold, the truth, and you. If you understand the nature of the beast, you do not have to be its victim. You can be its rider. The fire horse is a natural disaster in human form, but it is also the greatest source of energy in the 60-year cycle. It is a nuclear reactor given to you for 365 days. You can let it melt you down, or you can use it to power the next 60 years of your life. The choice is yours. The fuse is lit. The horse is at the gate. This is Prescient. We are watching. If you enjoy this type of content, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Otherwise, we may never see each other again. See you again soon, dear viewer.